So as I advanced you, today's a different lecture. Everything we have seen in the first 11 weeks will not be good or very useful without this one. You will see why. Has it ever happened to you that you go to an exam, you do very well and you don't get the mark that you thought you deserve? Has it happened to you that you go to a job interview, you do everything right and you still don't get the offer you think? Yeah? Today we'll understand why. That's the purpose of today. It's a very difficult thing to come up with the right name for the lecture today. Communication skills, it's been called like that for a while. But as you will see, we get deeper and deeper into what this is all about. We're going to talk about biochemistry. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. I hope you find this lecture interesting. I hope it should be the beginning of a lot of learning you will do on your own. There's no way I can cover everything that I want you to know in 3 hours. I just want to excite you, maybe make you discover something that maybe you've never seen before. And that should be a path for your own success. I discovered this myself about maybe 15 years ago. As you know, I managed an investment company, so that gave me the privilege of interacting with a lot of people and finding people whose job was to actually do this. I learned from them, okay? And then I decided that it would be perhaps a good idea to bring this to the classroom and see what you can learn from this. I want to start by, there is a paper, it's a good paper, and I want to paraphrase that paper into a graph. I want to give you somehow a caricature of that paper. It's a paper on social science. We're going to talk about a lot about social science today, and I call it the components of success. When you look at success and you do, say, your principal component analysis of what success is made of, these people realize that 15% of your success is due to the content of what you do. Footnote, everything I will say today is about person-to-person communication, okay? It's about human interaction. If you're interacting with a computer, none of what I'm going to be saying today applies. If you're interacting with a dog, a few things of what I'm going to be saying today apply. Everything I'm talking about is about human-to-human interaction, okay? Not interaction with your computer, no interaction with your pet. Although the pet is closer, certainly better than the computer, closer to what we're talking about today. So in that act of communication, 15% of your success is going to be due to content. 85% is everything else. Many of you are about to graduate. And I have to tell you now that in this university, in most universities, we have spent 100% of our time focusing on the 15% that matters. Today, I'm going to spend all 3 hours, I'm going to spend 100% of my time on the 85% that matters. I've spent 11 weeks in this course on the 15%. Today, I will spend 100% of the 3 hours on the 85% that matters. Okay? Don't think this is depressing. Oh my God, I spent 4 years here. What about the rest? I will get you, hopefully, on a path so that you can acquire the 85% somehow. Okay, that's my beginning of that. And in the act of communication, I like to quote or to bring to the front line a 20th century philosopher, Ludwig Wittgenstein. I don't know if you know him. If you don't, I suggest you do. He would have been very, very good if he had Twitter. He was a person full of aphorisms, and the aphorisms summarize very well what he said. And Nietzsche would have been very good with Twitter also, by the way. Okay, but today we focus on Wittgenstein, who is considered to be the philosopher of communication. Just a few of the things that he said. I'm going to do a lot of summaries today. I need to compress a lot of things into 3 hours, so I'm going to exaggerate in an extreme exercise of compression. And so with Wittgenstein, I'm going to summarize a lot of what he said into a few aphorisms. The first is, communication is effective only when it breeds understanding. This idea, very common amongst mathematicians, that communication is to impress and communication is to make sure the other person in front of you thinks that you're very smart. No, that doesn't work. That's not. According to Wittgenstein, no, the person needs to understand what you're saying. So that's the first. And another thing, which is also very important in what he said and to keep in mind, is communication is all about the others. Maybe very clear to you, you understand exactly what you mean, but if the others don't get it, it's not going to be useful. And in a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, as you will see, it's all about the others. And that's why it makes a difference if you're talking to a computer, a human, or a pet. They're different. And another aphorism, he said that if you can't express what you mean, maybe you didn't understand it in the first place. And you probably relate to this. In the process of discovery, this is how you realize, oh, I don't think I understand that. Then you go back and then you understand it, okay? So in the communication process, I'm going to focus on, I'm going to start with verbals, and then I'm going to start with nonverbals. I said earlier, I said earlier that content is 15%, and I would spend all my time on the 85%. The 85% contains a piece of it, which is the verbal component, and then a piece of that, which is the nonverbal. I'm going to start with the verbals. And the verbals, what I want to emphasize is that it's what I say here is absolutely essential, that everybody has solid communication skills. It doesn't matter who you are, okay? You can be a lawyer, you can be a doctor, you can be a nurse, you can be a parent, you can be a son. Babies are great communicators. They have it in their chemistry. So everybody needs to have that. No one should just ignore the act of communication. You need to have it. And we're going to start with the verbals. And for verbals, I want to make a connection with something that you probably do every day. You probably watch movies. You watch movies? Anybody watches movies? Okay, so I have an assignment for you today, which is to watch a movie. Maybe take your favorite movie. I'll tell you why. There are certain things that I need you to watch. Because presentations are like storytelling. Humans like stories. That's why you watch movies. And anybody here has done acting on theater, at school? No? Really? Performing? Yeah. You performed? Yeah, okay. Perform, you should, okay? That's another piece of advice I'll give you. Performing. It's an act of communication. If you are performing, you may think that if you are playing a piano in a concert hall, your job is to play the piano. That's not your job. No, your job is to communicate what you're doing with the audience. If you just play the piano, you can play beautifully, and people will go home and say, okay, well, that done, right? The act of communication is important. People who have performed will know this. And sometimes you need to create that connection with the audience. And stories is the best way to do that. I want to focus on the anatomy of a presentation. I want to have to rush through this. I spent on my longer versions of this course, which I give in MMF, for example, I like to spend 20 minutes talking about the first second of a presentation. I can't do that here. I don't have time. But I want you to understand that when you have a presentation is like a piece of real estate. Some parts are very important, some parts are less important. The first second is the most important. Followed by which one? The last second, okay? And then everything else is in the middle. So the first second is very important. As we will see today, a lot of your success will happen in that first second. And in that regard, I want to bring to your attention here something that Churchill once said. We're going to mention Churchill several times today. It's going to be one of our models to learn from. He was once asked why he never began a speech with, "It gives me a great deal of pleasure," or "I'm very grateful that I was invited to this conference," or "I'm very happy to be here." It's a very bad way to start. His response was, there are only a few things from which I derive great pleasure, and speaking is not one of them. It's a good answer. It's not. I'm sure he didn't mean that, but it's a very good way to emphasize something that I want to say, which is the first second. If you're at the job interview, the first second is very, very important. Very, very important. By the way, let me ask you somehow to test you a little bit. How would you approach the first second at a job interview? You don't even have time to show who you are. You can't say your name. You can't even. What should that first second be? I'm not going to spend 20 minutes, but maybe one yes. Job interview, first second. What do you do?
Maybe attracts their eyeballs.
How?
How it's.
You're talking about a result.
Okay.
And an objective. There's a difference between a result and an objective. The objective is something you can do, and the result is something which is not up to you, right?
Tells them a short story. Tells them short stories and it shows.
Story? 1 second?
If I only had 1 second, presumably this isn't even enough to say anything, I would try to establish confident body language.
Okay, we're going to talk a lot about that. But for example, what I highly recommend everybody is a smile. Okay? The smile, that's your first second. And it already says a lot. By the way, that's not verbal. I'm talking about verbals, right? It's going to be one of the non-verbals. So that's a piece of advice I give everybody. Start with a smile. First second. And you're already on your path to success, right? The first second is very, very important. Just think when you go to a job interview, for example, what you should do in that first second. And then you can talk about the second, the third second, and so on and so forth. You need to do the anatomy of your presentation. And of course, focus on the last. What's the last second that you're going to do? Okay, you think about that, okay? So the presentation needs to have a start, a beginning, and an end. What is the objective of a presentation? Objective, not the result. What is that I'm hired? Well, that's a result. What's the objective of a presentation, you think?
If the result is to be hired, then the objective is to convince them to hire me.
Okay. I'm not going to debate. A lot of these things are not like true false, because we're talking about things that it's not like math. 2 + 2 is 4. There's no question about that. Right? I would say that the objective of a presentation is that they listen to you. It may sound strange, but if you're making a presentation and people don't listen to you, then everything else will just not happen. And by the way, when you watch a movie, I'll go back to your movie watching experience. What's the objective of every movie you watch? What's the objective? To tell you the story of this person who divorced this? No, what's the objective? Is that you watch to the end. They're okay if you skip the credits in the end, but they need you to watch the whole movie. And watch the movies, they are engineered so that you watch. Failure for a movie is not that you don't like it, it's that you stop it and then go and do something else. Right? A presentation should be the same. So when you talk about something, you need to get people to follow you. Imagine giving a presentation, your thesis, defense. Well, people in the audience, people in the committee, well, they have to listen to you. They can say, oh, they have to listen to you, or at least have to pretend they listen to you. But I would still think that it should be your objective that they actually are engaged and they actually follow your presentation. And they want to know what's coming next, like when you watch a movie. So think about, don't take the attention of the audience for granted, because you don't have it. You don't have it. There are some, I don't like recipes, but I am going to present some recipes to you in case you knew about them, because at the end of today, we will understand why these recipes even make sense. We will be able to understand what is behind these recipes, which some people use. The first one is called the 666 rule. They say no more than 6 words per bullet, no more than 6 bullets per slide, and no more than 6 word slides in a row. These are rules. Maybe the MBA for Dummies has rules like this. I don't know, okay? But these are rules that exist out there. I'm not going to tell you that you have to do this. I'm not telling you that. But I want to reflect on this. What is behind this? Why do they say this? No more than 6 words per bullet, no more than 6 bullets per slide, no more than 6 word slides in a row. Don't answer, okay? We're coming to that. Here's another one, is the 10-20-30 rule. It says no more than 10 slides, no more than 20 minutes, and no less than 30-point font size. By the way, I'm breaking this rule because I'm speaking for 3 hours. I don't have a choice. These are rules. By the end of today, we will understand really what's behind these rules. And these rules are just very silly, almost silly encapsulations of things that are really, really important. These rules are not important, but they will encapsulate things that we'll be learning today. I wonder if you know this. How much architecture do you know? I want to use architecture now for a reason. This is the TD Center downtown. You know this? You know the architect, Mies van der Rohe? Have you heard of this guy? He's one of the best architects in the world. And have you been inside the TD Center? Just go. Just go there, go to the lobby. And then you will see what I mean. Then you will understand how to make a good presentation, I think. He is one of the people, less is more. You may have heard that sentence. He's not the one perhaps who created it. It looks like this has been around for a long time, but he was one of the people who actually made it famous. He was talking about architecture, but the same thing applies to many things that we do on a daily basis. And when it comes to a presentation, I want to leave you with a thought, which is a thought that would be very consistent with Mies van der Rohe, very consistent with the TD Center building downtown, which is a presentation achieves perfection not when there is nothing else to add, but when there is nothing that can be taken away. So we are typically not trained like this. Many people consider presentations, I've said everything, it's all there. Oh my God, this is missing. Let me see where I can put it. Your approach should be the opposite. When you have that, look at the presentation and say, what can I remove? If you can remove something and the presentation still stands, get rid of it. This is Mies van der Rohe. This has an immediate application, which is to eliminate what's called verbal graffiti. You know what that is? Verbal graffiti, all these things that people, first is that the things that have no meaning, like, get rid of them, okay? They only hide what you're trying to convey. And even worse, some of them is, find them, honestly, what would you say honestly in a conversation? To imply that the rest is not honest? Or why would you say, to tell you the truth? You say, no, don't tell me the truth. You know what I mean? It is very important that when you do a presentation, any presentation, that you have that economy. Get rid of what doesn't matter. If you have to say I love you, maybe that's what you say. And don't say like I. See what I mean? All right. So for that, I have here my first video. I hope that it works.
It's 1903, and this extraordinary guy named Teddy Roosevelt is standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon. And at that time, people wanted to create hotels and spas and turn the Grand Canyon in 1903 into a profit-making Disneyland of the environment. And he stood and said no. And he created a tipping point for the environmental movement and for the world. He said, leave it as it is. The ages have been at work on it, and man can only mar it. The world would have been a different place today without those words, those tipping point words from President Theodore Roosevelt. Fast forward, his fifth cousin, President Franklin Roosevelt, 30 years later, 1933, in the midst of a huge crisis, the Great Depression of America, said a few words to create a tipping point towards healing for the United States.
First of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into advance.
The world would have been a different place without those words at that time from that man. So, in my 30 years of studying public speaking and great speeches, I've found that there are 7 secrets that great speakers do that other people don't. And it's my belief that every single human being can be a great speaker, and that their words can create a tipping point, and that their words and their essence can change the world. The first secret is about words, and understanding that words can be the best, the most amazing in the world, but they only actually touch people and communicate 7% of the impact that one human being has on another. Voice tone, the variation in your voice, the enthusiasm, the love, the passion that comes through your voice, 38%. In your body language, are you looking into someone's eyes, or are you looking over their head and not connected? So words, voice tone, and body language, those are the 3 vehicles, the 3 pathways that great communication happens in. Secret number 4, what most people do is they throw so much data out, trying to prove that they're smart, trying to get all the content out. Words are the 7%. What is important is, what is that one thing that you want to leave people with? What is that headline? That's what makes a great speech, and that's what we're talking about today. Secret number 5 is fascinating. If you are afraid, are any of you afraid of public speaking? 41% of the world, across cultures, is terrified, almost to the point, and often to the point, of actually turning down speaking appointments, whether they're political leaders or business leaders or charitable leaders. They turn down opportunities to shake the world because they're scared. There are a lot of reasons why people are scared, but in my experience, the number one reason is that we don't know what public speaking really is. We don't know the true definition. The true definition of public speaking is that public speaking is nothing more than having a conversation from your heart about something that you are authentically passionate about, right? If you think it's a performance, you're going to be 0% you and 100% actor, and we don't get to see and experience and feel who you are. So I want you to write the word speech down on a piece of paper, and I want you to put a circle around it, and I want you to put a line through it. I don't want you ever, ever to give another speech. That's not what great speakers do. They don't give a speech, they don't give a performance, they don't make a presentation to the audience. They have what? They have a conversation with. It is a circle. It brings us all together. We are a web connected to every other person. That's what great speakers do. When I first met Princess Diana, she looks me in the eyes and says, "You know, I'm so scared of public speaking, and I wish that I could do what Charles does." Now, this was when they were actually breaking up, so it was even more difficult for her to admit that. And I said, "What does he do?" He said, "Well, he just stands up there and he tells this funny joke, and then he moves on, and he's completely unfazed by it." And I told her that Prince Charles doesn't have what she has, and what she had was what touched and moved the world. People connected with her on a human level, and that all you need to do, Your Royal Highness, is just share from your heart, that huge heart that you have, and your gut, and people will love you. Even through the speech that scares you, they will feel you, they will know you, they will connect with you, and that it is far more effective than giving a speech, than telling a funny joke, but not sharing your heart. So secret number 6, and you'll notice this in some of the speakers, is that we actually have 5 parts of our brain. Those 5 different senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and feeling, translate into 4 different actual communication languages. Speak one of them, you're not going to be very good. Speak 2 of them, you'll be average no matter who you are. Speak all 4, no matter who you are, you're going to rock the world, because you're going to be giving every person in the audience something that they can connect to. And visual is the energy of energy. It's the language of energy. It's Robin Williams. I've used him as an example, and I'm going to continue to use him as an example. How amazing was Robin Williams? Auditory is the ability to translate details and what you see, what you think, what you feel into a story, into words. Ronald Reagan was a great example of that. Auditory digital, that's the Albert Einstein, the Bill Gates, the analytical, statistically driven kind of information. You don't have that, you don't have a foundation of credibility. People are going to go, wow, that person's very charming, but there's no there. And kinesthetic is the James Earl Jones, the Morgan Freeman, the Barry White. Oh, baby. It's the poet Ali. It's that connecting thing that is inside of each and every one of us that is the most important thing in being a speaker and being a communicator. And then 7, you can just have this and nothing else, and you will still rock the world, as so many people do. And that is your authentic passion. What is it that is so effing cool that you just have to share it, or so effing compelling? And I use that middle word. You can use whatever version you want, because it's a visceral thing. It's not intellectual. So let's go back on our chronological tour of great speeches that have created tipping points in the world. Now, this person, Lou Gehrig, didn't create a tipping point in terms of the global geopolitics of the world, but he created a tipping point in terms of understanding the human spirit and his own. Here it was, as you all know, he was diagnosed with ALS. He tried to play, he couldn't play. He had to end his career, and Yankee Stadium held a day for him. Lou Gehrig Day. It was in 1939. He gets out there, and he, like so many of you, was petrified of public speaking. And he's there, and then just when it's time for him to go on, he starts backing away and said, I can't do this. His manager comes up to him, puts his arm around him, and said, Lou, they're all here for you, my friend. They're all here for you. And walks him up, and he goes, and this is what he says.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth.
Everyone who studies public speaking puts that speech in their list. It's just unbelievable, the sense of gratitude that this man had in the middle of his own personal crisis. But let's go to the next year, a huge tipping point about to happen for Great Britain and their battle against Nazi Germany. 3 days before this speech, King George goes to Winston Churchill and says, please, I want you to be the prime minister. We've got to do something. We've got to face this threat. And this is Winston Churchill. It's just the audio. They didn't have video in the House of Commons in 1940.
I would say to the House, as I said to those who joined the government, I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat.
The world would have been a different place without Winston Churchill and those words and that level of conviction, leadership, and resolve. Let's move forward now. I have 3 from John F. Kennedy, and you'll see why. This one you all know about. He was following an old general, Dwight D. Eisenhower. He's in his 40s, a whole new era for America and the world. You'll be familiar with the first part of this, but probably not the second.
My fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
And he continues.
My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
The world became a different place because of that speech and that new president. And he proved it several times. A couple years later, at Rice University, he's talking about his authentic passion to put a man on the moon. Listen to the level of detail here, and notice that this is such a visionary leader that he even commits himself and the United States of America when we don't even at that point know how to do it.
That we shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field, made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that on the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this, and do all this, and do it right, and do it first before this decade is out, then we must be bold.
How amazing was that, right? Sadly, he didn't get to live to see that, but he made it happen through his vision, his leadership, and creating that tipping point with that speech. And then, as you know, the famous speech, he's in Berlin, the West Berliners are suffering mightily. He goes in and says they're not alone.
All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. And therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words, Ich bin ein Berliner.
Okay, so next year after that, or that actually later that year, Dr. Martin Luther King, I think you've all been aware of this, no one would doubt that this speech, half of which he ad-libbed, this speech shook the world and created a tipping point.
I have a dream that my poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
If only it were true, and we're making progress because of that speech. Barbara Jordan, someone you may not know, a Texas congresswoman, was the last person to speak at the Watergate Committee, talking about whether we were in fact going to impeach Richard Nixon. She was a freshman congresswoman, it was around midnight, and yet her words, with that incredible voice tone of hers, shook the world and catalyzed the movement against Richard Nixon.
Today I am an inquisitor, and hyperbole would not be fictional and would not overstate the solemnness that I feel right now. My faith in the Constitution is whole, it is complete, it is total. And I am not going to sit here and be an idle spectator to the diminution, the subversion, the destruction of the Constitution.
Barack Obama.
Tonight is a particular honor for me because, let's face it, my presence on this stage is pretty unlikely.
And that's it right there. That speech was a tipping point. It changed America. Whether you like him or not, that one speech in 2004 changed America. We don't have audio of this, but one of my favorite speeches ever is a speech that was given by Albert Einstein. He says, the most beautiful and deepest experience a man can have is the sense of the mysterious, to sense that behind anything that can be experienced, there is a something that our mind cannot grasp and whose beauty and simplicity are but a feeble reflection. To me, it suffices to wonder at these secrets and to attempt humbly to grasp with my mind a mere image of the lofty structure of all that there is. And he did that and created a shift where we understood how matter and energy are the same and created a new paradigm. And some people even think that it mirrors this ancient symbol, which was the symbol and is the symbol for God, called Om. And if you look at it, there's a backwards E, there's an equal sign, there's an M, which is on its side, there's a C, and there is a supernumerary that also looks like a square. E equals mc squared, thousands of years ago, reflected in Albert Einstein's discovery in 1906. I want to play this. This is the most powerful, in my opinion, the most powerful couple minutes of oratory, recorded tipping point speech making in the history of the world. Feel it and notice it. This is the last speech he gave before he died. He died, and it was obvious he knew it. He died the next day.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
So, are you afraid of public speaking? If so, you're along with half of the people on the planet. The way over that is to see it as a conversation from your heart and to ask yourself this one question: what is my dharma? What is it that I am passionate about that I want to share with the world? Something that my unique DNA, which is contained in every one of 50 trillion cells carried in 50,000 atomic bombs worth of energy, that's what Einstein said, will allow me to be out in the world, make a difference, and give speeches, share my passion, and make the world a better place. Every single person I've worked with has the ability, in their own way, to break through, to make the world a better place, to bring that passion out, and to create a tipping point that will change every single thing on the planet and indeed make the world a better place. And I encourage you to please step through the fear, share your passion, share who you are authentically, and make that difference. Thank you all so much.
All these videos are in my YouTube channel. In the recorded version of today's class, I'll have them whole. You can watch all of them. Some of them are very long. Some are very short. This one is good. Despite all the technical difficulties, I hope you got to see something already. Okay, first of all, this guy is a great speaker. Did you notice any verbal graffiti in his speech? There was nothing. This is one of the best people I've ever seen. He says 7 tips are good tips. Today we will not only understand, but I want to go to the source that creates those tips. And I want to mention a book. It's one of my favorites. The book is Speak Like Churchill, Stand Like Lincoln It's a great book. It's about communication. I highly recommend that. If you're gonna buy one book on communication, get this one. Talks about these two characters. Well, talks about communication, but uses these two characters as metaphors. Churchill, who was a great speaker, and Lincoln, who was a great visual. We'll mention that. I'm going to start with Churchill. Churchill was very interesting when he became, I think, defense minister. When he became minister, when he was giving speeches, he had speech writers who would write his speeches, and he would have to train them so that they would write his speeches. He was very specific, very particular how he wanted his speeches to be written, because if, for example, something he said, "I never was so much owed by so many to so few." This is one of his sentences. It's very interesting. You can analyze it. The way it uses the words is just fantastic. But he would insist that it's not written like that. It's written like this. He wanted line breaks to be aligned with the breaks which are natural when you speak. And it makes a very big difference. When you say something, where you put the breaks makes a very big difference. If you've performed music, you know that. Imagine a piece of music without rests, right? Mozart was fantastic at this. Mozart's music excels at the rest. One of my, I'm a big fan of Bernie Sanders, as you know, and he has a sentence which I like very much. Is, you know, the Beethoven's Third Symphony? It's the Eroica. It's the one that he was composing in honor of Napoleon. Then he scratched the name Napoleon because he ended up hating the guy. He says that the loudest sound in the Eroica Symphony is a rest, somewhere in the first movement. And if you know the symphony, you probably know what I'm talking about. One of the moments of greatest fury in that symphony is actually represented with a rest. So Churchill, in his speeches, he insisted that things need to be breaking down according to how you speak. But that's not, you can choose to do pauses in different places depending on what you want to say and who you are. This is up to you. You are the one who has to decide that. And there's a rule in acting, especially in theater, which is you always pause before the important word you're going to say. Every sentence has an important word. You need to know what is the important word and pause right before it. Next time you watch a movie, I want you to dissect the movie. First of all, you're going to notice that movies are broken down into sequences. How long do you think is a typical sequence in a movie?
Around 20 minutes, maybe.
A sequence is hardly ever more than 10 seconds. Just watch the movie, okay? After 10 seconds, something needs to change. You will see. You will see. On TikTok, a sequence is typically 2-3 seconds. Notice the TikTok videos, they've compressed that. And a sequence is a continuous video until there's a break. In TikTok, some TikTok videos are like every 2 seconds there's a break. All right? Those breaks are very important and they need to be timed for efficiency. And we'll understand how that works. So you need to be able to do that. And speaking is an important thing. But then Lincoln is a very interesting guy. I'm going to talk about Lincoln. I'm just summarizing the book in 1 minute. Lincoln was very tall. Lincoln is that guy. He was very tall. And he often wore a top hat. You know why? To appear even taller. Okay? Appearance is something very important. We're about to switch into nonverbals. In nonverbals, we'll understand all of this. We're going to hear Amy Cuddy. You know Amy Cuddy? Anybody has heard of Amy Cuddy? She's one of the, she's wonderful. Her video I have to show you in its entirety. We have to watch from the beginning to the end today. And I hope the sound works because that is perhaps the most important video we're going to watch today, okay? Abraham Lincoln did something remarkable. He is the one who did the Gettysburg Address. You know the Gettysburg Address? It was right after the war, and it's a very famous address. I'm sure you've certainly that part, that definition of democracy, is something that I'm sure you have seen. What's remarkable about Lincoln, you know when he gave this address, what he was doing when he gave this address? Was he addressing people? No. He was introducing the main speaker. Do you know who the main speaker was? No one knows. So he gave an address, very short. I'm sure the main speaker spoke for 30 minutes or more. No one remembers who he was. But it's very interesting to analyze that because, again, I don't have time. There's many things to say, but do analyze the Gettysburg Address. And in fact, analyze it in an active way. A piece of homework that I suggest is rewrite the Gettysburg Address the way Churchill would insist to be written. That means that you go through it and then you introduce the line breaks. And when you introduce the line breaks, you'll understand how big a difference even a wonderful speech like this one makes when you have the right line breaks. And this is important for a different reason. The reason verbal graffiti exists is because some people think that when you are presenting, there should be no pauses, no rests. If you watch television has hardly any pauses. Everything is delivered to you without pauses. It's very important for television that everything is continuous. And I think we've been mistrained by television, and we've lost the value of the pause. Pauses are very, very valuable, extremely valuable. And I encourage you, if you like these kinds of things, to rewrite the Gettysburg Address the Churchill way. You will learn something. I have to continue. This is all. I have a special piece of advice for you who are mathematicians, because mathematicians have an added difficulty when you make a presentation, and that is the presence of equations. They say rule, joke. People say that every time in a text, every time you have an equation, you lose 50% of the audience. Equations are hard, but equations are also wonderful if you use them the right way. I'll give you some advice for equations. Equations need explanations. You present the heat equation, you've seen the heat equation 10 times every day for the last 5 years. The people who you're talking to, they don't know what you're talking about. So it is very important that you spend a lot of time with every equation. Every variable requires an explanation. And it's not only, t represents time. What do you mean time? Time is what? What time? I have to explain everything. Do treat your equations with extreme care. Everything that we're saying today will apply especially when you have equations, when you have definitions. Every variable needs to be explained. You need to explain why that equation is what it is. You need to explain how you get to it. And then, of course, what it means. All of these need to explain. You can't just say, and this is the Black-Scholes equation, and then you move and do your presentation about something, something, something. You've lost 80% of the audience at that point. And remember, the first objective of a presentation is that it is heard. You know this Beatles song, Father Mackenzie writing the sermon that no one will hear? Strawberry Fields? Yeah, you don't want that. You don't want that. So my advice is you need to practice. Malcolm Gladwell's book, he says that you need to do something 10,000 hours before you become good at it. So if you want to be good at doing job interviews, what does that mean? 10,000 hours of job. No, 10,000 hours of job interviews. So how can you get to 10,000 hours of job interviews?
You don't get hired much. Don't get hired much.
That's an option. I have a better one. I have a better one. And this is where I recommend, for example, in MMF, this is what I do. I create the interview club. Just interview each other. It's more fun than you think. Not only you practice a job interview, you actually get to switch roles. You get to be the interviewer. And that's very interesting, because understanding the point of view of the interviewer is extremely important if you're going to be on the other side. So my advice is get some pizza and some beers and get some friends and interview each other. It's a great way to spend Saturday evening. Better than you think. And that, 10,000 hours. Guarantee you'll become a great interviewer. Interviewee. Interviewer too, by the way. Record yourself. And whether you're doing this to yourself or with friends, try to look for verbal graffiti. It's very easy to spot. Just look for it. Oh, remove that. Oh, really? I didn't say that. Yes, you did. Get rid of it. Look at your pauses and practice. There's only 10,000 hours. You can be listening to me explain to you how to ride a bicycle. You will never learn how to ride a bicycle until you get one and fall a few times, and then you get it. This is the same. No amount of advice, no amount of theoretical discussion we can have in the classroom will help you. You need to do this yourself. And use pauses and silences to add depth to what you're saying. And don't speed. I would say the slower you speak, the better. You need people to understand what you're saying. Don't try to impress anybody. Impressing doesn't work. Not even at a job interview. Practice. 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours. And read your audience. If you're doing this with a friend, your friend is going to be more transparent to you than if you go to a real job interview. So it's good practice. This is what you should do. Okay, this ends my verbal skills discussion. I want to get into nonverbals now. If this is what I told you earlier, 15% is content, 85% is everything else. When it comes to nonverbals, this is what people say. 55%, more than half of your success is due to the nonverbals, the things that you can't even express in words. And there's a reason for that we will learn in about an hour. So this is really important, the nonverbals. We need to get into that. I have here a video. Let's see if you can hear this.
What did you do to my sign?
I wrote the same, but in different words.
Thanks, love.
So I wanted to prove that all marketing was the same thing. No matter what you were selling, it was always the same thing, right? And good marketing talked about the buyer, and bad marketing talked about the seller. Make sense? I versus you, right? So to illustrate my point, I wanted to prove that what the homeless do and what Microsoft does is the same thing. So if you think about what the homeless do, there is advertising. They sit there with a little sign that says, I'm homeless, I'm hungry, I got 6 kids, I'm a veteran, like whatever, trying to appeal to everybody. That's called a little billboard, right? Microsoft has a billboard that says more memory, bigger screen, all the rest of it, right? More RAM, more ROM, right? And what the homeless are selling is goodwill. So if you walk past a homeless person and you put money in their cup, you feel good. If you give them nothing, you either feel nothing or feel bad. You paid for that feeling. There's an exchange of consideration. I sold you goodwill, you paid for it, you got it, right? They're selling goodwill, that's what they're doing. They're selling the feeling of goodwill. So I found a homeless person who was willing to help me, and her sign was pretty typical, and I found out that she makes between $20 and $30 a day selling goodwill, and she works an 8 to 10 hour day, right? $30 is considered a good day, right? Selling goodwill. And like I said, her sign was pretty typical. So I asked her if I could change her sign, and we did. And the sign that I gave her, she made $40 in 2 hours. The sign that I gave her said, if you only give once a month, please think of me next time. It wasn't about the seller, it was about the giver. What are the reasons people say they don't give? How do I know that they're genuine? I can't give to everyone. So I simply answered the questions. If you only give once a month, please think of me next time. I know you can't give to everybody, I'm legit. That's all, right? Now here's the point I was going to make. She could have made $150 that day, but after she made her $40 in 2 hours, she left. Because one of the reasons she's homeless, or we could surmise that one of the reasons she's homeless is she's decided that she needs $20 or $30 to live per day. So once she had it, she moved on. That's a narrative. It's a narrative, right? So she'll stay there because she didn't sit longer. That's a narrative. So there's a wonderful little trick you can use with your narrative, right? Just add the word yet at the end, okay? I'm not famous yet. I'm not that talented yet. I'm so bad, I'm not good at auditions. Like, I need to get better at, like I suck at auditions for now, right? You can just add a couple of words of hope or opportunity, or the potential for future, or some sort of infinite component that will profoundly change your narrative.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Simon Sinek this guy is wonderful. His books are great too, and his videos on YouTube are wonderful too. I'm going to use him maybe one more time today. Here is one of the best commercials of all time, in my opinion.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
We will explain why, okay? There is a human element in this that I have not yet discussed, so I need to discuss it. And for that, I have to talk a little bit about psychology. I want to introduce the concept of social science. This is something which you may think this doesn't apply to you. I told you this applies to everybody. Every human is like that. This is the some summary of the psychology by Jung. everybody's different. And you can think of a person like a pie chart, depending on how they value three key components: truth, beauty, or physical exercise or physical activity. Okay, so for example, the athlete will be here. You know, they're all about physical exercise. They may have very little appreciation for beauty. Not always, you know, not always. And the truth is something that doesn't care for them. Facts are like not an issue, right? But then the scientists would be somehow different, right? They're driven by the truth. They couldn't care about what's beautiful or not, right? But the artist cares all about what's beautiful, and sometimes the truth is less important to them. Yes. So everybody has a pie chart. I wonder what your pie chart is. You analyze that yourself, okay? But humans are like that. And because humans are like that, we are all made the same way. This has consequences in the way we react to things. And again, this is perhaps the most important video that we're going to see today. I need to put it all whole. If things like 20 minutes, you need to listen to all of it, especially if you've never heard Amy Cuddy speak. After that, everything will change. And then this video will free me up to get into a totally new area, which is psychology and the structure of the brain. So let's watch this video.
So I want to start by offering you a free, no-tech life hack. And all it requires of you is this, that you change your posture for 2 minutes. But before I give it away, I want to ask you to right now do a little audit of your body and what you're doing with your body. So how many of you are sort of making yourselves smaller? Maybe you're hunching, crossing your legs, maybe wrapping your ankles. Sometimes we hold on to our arms like this. Sometimes we spread out. I see you. So I want you to pay attention to what you're doing right now. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes, and I'm hoping that if you sort of learn to tweak this a little bit, it could significantly change the way your life unfolds. So we're really fascinated with body language, and we're particularly interested in other people's body language. You know, we're interested in, like, you know, an awkward interaction, or a smile, or a contemptuous glance, or maybe a very awkward wink, or maybe even something like a handshake.
Here they are arriving at number 10, and look at this lucky policeman gets to shake hands with the President of the United States. Oh, and here comes the Prime Minister of the... No.
So a handshake, or the lack of a handshake, can have us talking for weeks and weeks and weeks, even the BBC and the New York Times. So obviously, when we think about nonverbal behavior or body language, but we call it nonverbals as social scientists, it's language. So we think about communication. When we think about communication, we think about interactions. So what is your body language communicating to me? What's mine communicating to you? And there's a lot of reason to believe that this is a valid way to look at this. So social scientists have spent a lot of time looking at the effects of our body language or other people's body language on judgments. And we make sweeping judgments and inferences from body language. And those judgments can predict really meaningful life outcomes, like who we hire or promote, who we ask out on a date. For example, Nalini Ambady, a researcher at Tufts University, shows that when people watch 30-second soundless clips of real physician-patient interactions, their judgments of the physician's niceness predict whether or not that physician will be sued. So it doesn't have to do so much with whether or not that physician was incompetent, but do we like that person and how they interacted? Even more dramatic, Alex Todorov at Princeton has shown us that judgments of political candidates' faces in just 1 second predict 70% of US Senate and gubernatorial race outcomes. And even, let's go digital, emoticons used well in online negotiations can lead you to claim more value from that negotiation. If you use them poorly, bad idea, right? So when we think of nonverbals, we think of how we judge others, how they judge us, and what the outcomes are. We tend to forget, though, the other audience that's influenced by our nonverbals, and that's ourselves. We are also influenced by our nonverbals, our thoughts and our feelings and our physiology. So what nonverbals am I talking about? I'm a social psychologist, I study prejudice, and I teach at a competitive business school. So it was inevitable that I would become interested in power dynamics. I became especially interested in nonverbal expressions of power and dominance. And what are nonverbal expressions of power and dominance? Well, this is what they are. So in the animal kingdom, they are about expanding. So you make yourself big, you stretch out, you take up space, you're basically opening up. It's about opening up. And this is true across the animal kingdom. It's not just limited to primates, and humans do the same thing. So they do this both when they have power sort of chronically, and also when they're feeling powerful in the moment. And this one is especially interesting because it really shows us how universal and old these expressions of power are. This expression, which is known as pride, Jessica Tracy has studied, she shows that people who are born with sight and people who are congenitally blind do this when they win at a physical competition. So when they cross the finish line and they've won, it doesn't matter if they've never seen anyone do it, they do this. So the arms up in the V, the chin is slightly lifted. What do we do when we feel powerless? We do exactly the opposite. We close up, we wrap ourselves up, we make ourselves small. We don't want to bump into the person next to us. So again, both animals and humans do the same thing. And this is what happens when you put together high and low power. So what we tend to do when it comes to power is that we complement the other's nonverbals. So if someone's being really powerful with us, we tend to make ourselves smaller. We don't mirror them, we do the opposite of them. So I'm watching this behavior in the classroom, and what do I notice? I notice that MBA students really exhibit the full range of power nonverbals. So you have people who are like caricatures of alphas, like really coming into the room, they get right into the middle of the room before class even starts, like they really want to occupy space. When they sit down, they're sort of spread out, they raise their hands like this. You have other people who are virtually collapsing when they come in. As soon as they come in, you see it. You see it on their faces and their bodies, and they sit in their chair and they make themselves tiny, and they go like this when they raise their hand. I noticed a couple things about this. One, you're not going to be surprised, it seems to be related to gender. So women are much more likely to do this kind of thing than men. Women feel chronically less powerful than men, so this is not surprising. But the other thing I noticed is that it also seemed to be related to the extent to which the students were participating and how well they were participating. And this is really important in the MBA classroom because participation counts for half the grade. So business schools have been struggling with this gender grade gap. You get these equally qualified women and men coming in, and then you get these differences in grades, and it seems to be partly attributable to participation. So I started to wonder, okay, so you have these people coming in like this, and they're participating. Is it possible that we could get people to fake it, and would it lead them to participate more? So my main collaborator, Dana Carney, who's at Berkeley, and I really wanted to know, can you fake it till you make it? Like, can you do this just for a little while and actually experience a behavioral outcome that makes you seem more powerful? So we know that our nonverbals govern how other people think and feel about us. There's a lot of evidence, but our question really was, do our nonverbals govern how we think and feel about ourselves? There's some evidence that they do. So, for example, when we smile when we feel happy, but also when we're forced to smile by holding a pen in our teeth like this, it makes us feel happy. So it goes both ways. When it comes to power, it also goes both ways. So when you feel powerful, you're more likely to do this, but it's also possible that when you pretend to be powerful, you are more likely to actually feel powerful. So the second question really was, so we know that our minds change our bodies, but is it also true that our bodies change our minds? And when I say minds, in the case of the powerful, what am I talking about? So I'm talking about thoughts and feelings and the sort of physiological things that make up our thoughts and feelings. And in my case, that's hormones. I look at hormones. So what do the minds of the powerful versus the powerless look like? So powerful people tend to be, not surprisingly, more assertive and more confident, more optimistic. They actually feel that they're going to win even at games of chance. They also tend to be able to think more abstractly. So there are a lot of differences. They take more risks. There are a lot of differences between powerful and powerless people. Physiologically, there also are differences on two key hormones, testosterone, which is the dominance hormone, and cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So what we find is that high-power alpha males in primate hierarchies have high testosterone and low cortisol. And powerful and effective leaders also have high testosterone and low cortisol. So what does that mean? When you think about power, people tended to think only about testosterone because that was about dominance. But really, power is also about how you react to stress. So do you want the high-power leader that's dominant, high on testosterone, but really stress reactive? Probably not, right? You want the person who's powerful and assertive and dominant, but not very stress reactive, the person who's laid back. So we know that in primate hierarchies, if an alpha needs to take over, if an individual needs to take over an alpha role sort of suddenly, within a few days, that individual's testosterone has gone up significantly and his cortisol has dropped significantly. So we have this evidence, both that the body can shape the mind, at least at the facial level, and also that role changes can shape the mind. So what happens, okay, you take a role change, what happens if you do that at a really minimal level, like this tiny manipulation, this tiny intervention? For 2 minutes you say, I want you to stand like this, and it's going to make you feel more powerful. So this is what we did. We decided to bring people into the lab and run a little experiment. And these people adopted for 2 minutes either high power poses or low power poses. And I'm just going to show you 5 of the poses, although they took on only 2. So here's one, a couple more. This one has been dubbed the Wonder Woman by the media. Here are a couple more. So you can be standing or you can be sitting. And here are the low power poses. So you're folding up, you're making yourself small. This one is very low power. When you're touching your neck, you're really kind of protecting yourself. So this is what happens. They come in, they spit into a vial. We, for 2 minutes, say, you need to do this or this. They don't look at pictures of the poses. We don't want to prime them with the concept of power. We want them to be feeling power, right? So 2 minutes they do this. We then ask them, how powerful do you feel on a series of items? And then we give them an opportunity to gamble. And then we take another saliva sample. That's it. That's the whole experiment. So this is what we find. Risk tolerance, which is the gambling. What we find is that when you're in the high power pose condition, 86% of you will gamble. When you're in the low power pose condition, only 60%. And that's a pretty whopping significant difference. Here's what we find on testosterone. From their baseline when they come in, high power people experience about a 20% increase. And low-power people experience about a 10% decrease. So again, 2 minutes and you get these changes. Here's what you get on cortisol. High-power people experience about a 25% decrease, and the low-power people experience about a 15% increase. So 2 minutes lead to these hormonal changes that configure your brain to basically be either assertive, confident, and comfortable, or really stress reactive, and feeling sort of shut down. And we've all had that feeling, right? So it seems that our nonverbals do govern how we think and feel about ourselves. So it's not just others, but it's also ourselves. Also, our bodies change our minds. But the next question, of course, is, can power posing for a few minutes really change your life in meaningful ways? So this is in the lab, it's this little task, it's just a couple of minutes. Where can you actually apply this, which we cared about, of course. And so we think it's really, what what matters, I mean, where you want to use this is evaluative situations, like social threat situations. Where are you being evaluated? Either by your friends, like for teenagers, it's at the lunchroom table. It could be, for some people, it's speaking at a school board meeting. It might be giving a pitch, or giving a talk like this, or doing a job interview. We decided that the one that most people could relate to, because most people had been through, was the job interview. So we published these findings, and the media are all over it, and they say, okay, so this is what you do when you go in for the job interview, right? So we were, of course, horrified, and said, oh my God, no, that's not what we meant at all, for numerous reasons. No, don't do that. Again, this is not about you talking to other people, it's you talking to yourself. What do you do before you go into a job interview? You do this. Right? You're sitting down, you're looking at your iPhone or your Android, not trying to leave anyone out. You're looking at your notes, you're hunching up, making yourself small, when really what you should be doing maybe is this, like in the bathroom, right? Do that, find 2 minutes. So that's what we want to test, okay? So we bring people into a lab, and they do either high or low power poses again. They go through a very stressful job interview. It's 5 minutes long. They are being recorded, they're being judged also, and the judges are trained to give no nonverbal feedback. So they look like this. Like, imagine this is the person interviewing you. So for 5 minutes, nothing. And this is worse than being heckled. People hate this. It's what Marianne LaFrance calls standing in social quicksand. So this really spikes your cortisol. So this is the job interview we put them through, because we really wanted to see what happened. We then have these coders look at these tapes, 4 of them. They're blind to the hypothesis, they're blind to the conditions, they have no idea who's been posing in what pose. And they end up looking at these sets of tapes, and they say, oh, we want to hire these people, all the high power posers, we don't want to hire these people. We also evaluate these people much more positively overall. But what's driving it? It's not about the content of the speech. It's about the presence that they're bringing to the speech. We also, because we rate them on all these variables related to sort of competence, like how well structured is the speech? How good is it? What are their qualifications? No effect on those things. This is what's affected. These kinds of things. People are bringing their true selves, basically. They're bringing themselves. They bring their ideas, but as themselves, with no, residue over them. So this is what's driving the effect, or mediating the effect. So when I tell people about this, that our bodies change our minds, and our minds can change our behavior, and our behavior can change our outcomes, they say to me, it feels fake, right? So I said, fake it till you make it. Like, it's not me. Like, I don't want to get there and then still feel like a fraud. I don't want to feel like an imposter. I don't want to get there only to feel like I'm not supposed to be here. And that really resonated with me, because I want to tell you a little story about being an imposter and feeling like I'm not supposed to be here. When I was 19, I was in a really bad car accident. I was thrown out of a car, rolled several times. I was thrown from the car, and I woke up in a head injury rehab ward, and I had been withdrawn from college, and I learned that my IQ had dropped by 2 standard deviations, which was very traumatic. I knew my IQ because I had identified with being smart, and I had been called gifted as a child. So I'm taken out of college. I keep trying to go back. They say, you're not going to finish college. Like, just, there are other things for you to do, but that's not going to work out for you. So I really struggled with this. And I have to say, having your identity taken from you, your core identity, and for me it was being smart, having that taken from you, there's nothing that leaves you feeling more powerless than that. So I felt entirely powerless. I worked and worked and worked, and I got lucky and worked and got lucky and worked. Eventually I graduated from college. It took me 4 years longer than my peers. And I convinced someone, my angel advisor, Susan Fisk, to take me on. And so I ended up at Princeton, and I was like, I am not supposed to be here. I am an imposter. And the night before my first year talk, and the first year talk at Princeton is a 20-minute talk to 20 people. That's it. I was so afraid of being found out the next day that I called her and said, I'm quitting. She was like, you are not quitting, because I took a gamble on you and you're staying. You're going to stay, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to fake it. You're going to do every talk that you ever get asked to do. You're just going to do it and do it and do it, even if you're terrified and just paralyzed and having an out-of-body experience, until you have this moment where you say, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. Like, I have become this. I am actually doing this. So that's what I did. 5 years in grad school. A few years, I'm at Northwestern. I moved to Harvard. I'm at Harvard. I'm not really thinking about it anymore, but for a long time I had been thinking, not supposed to be here, not supposed to be here. So at the end of my first year at Harvard, a student who had not talked in class the entire semester, who I had said, look, you gotta participate or else you're gonna fail, came into my office. I really didn't know her at all. And she came in totally defeated, and she said, I'm not supposed to be here. And that was the moment for me, because two things happened. One was that I realized, oh my gosh, I don't feel like that anymore. I don't feel that anymore, but she does, and I get that feeling. And the second was, she is supposed to be here. Like, she can fake it, she can become it. So he's like, yes, you are. You are supposed to be here, and tomorrow you're gonna fake it, you're gonna make yourself powerful, and you're gonna, and you're gonna go into the classroom, and you are gonna give the best comment ever. And she gave the best comment ever. And people turned around, they were like, oh my God, I didn't even notice her sitting there, She comes back to me months later, and I realized that she had not just faked it till she made it, she had actually faked it till she became it. So she had changed. And so I want to say to you, don't fake it till you make it. Fake it till you become it. It's not do it enough until you actually become it and internalize. The last thing I want to leave you with is this. Tiny tweaks can lead to big changes. So this is 2 minutes. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Before you go into the next stressful evaluative situation, for 2 minutes, try doing this in the elevator, in a bathroom stall, at your desk behind closed doors. That's what you want to do. Configure your brain to cope the best in that situation. Get your testosterone up, get your cortisol down. Don't leave that situation feeling like, oh, I didn't show them who I am. Leave that situation feeling like, oh, I really feel like I got to say who I am and show who I am. So I want to ask you first, both to try power posing, and also I want to ask you to share this science, because this is simple. I don't have ego involved in this. Give it away. Share it with people, because the people who can use it the most are the ones with no resources and no technology and no status and no power. Give it to them, because they can do it in private. They need their bodies, privacy, and 2 minutes, and it can significantly change the outcomes of their life. Thank you.
I don't know what you think about the Amy Cuddy video. I don't know if you agree with it, if you disagree with it. Either way, what I'm going to do in the remainder of today is to go deeper into some of those issues and tell you not only that what she's saying is true, but actually why. And to do that, I want to start with an experiment. I want to do a video, which is actually an experiment, is you have to do something in the video. Some of you will have seen the video already. If you've seen the video already, please do nothing. Do nothing. If you have not seen the video already, please do what the video says, okay?
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Okay, so why is this relevant? You see, once you see the moonwalking bear, there's no way you cannot not see it. But if you're counting the number of passes, you don't see it. You don't see it. There's a reason for that. And this is what I want to talk about next. I want to talk about the limbic brain. This is not it's only going to become a course in neuroscience, almost. Our brain, if you do a cross-section of the brain, it contains different layers. The inner layer is called the limbic brain. It's the one that we all have it, obviously. In fact, it is almost the same as it was when we first developed it. And we've developed that when we were reptiles. That part of the brain is practically the same. It's the limbic brain. What we've developed after that is the frontal neocortex. And the frontal neocortex, only humans have it. Monkeys don't have it, dogs don't have it, only humans have it. But the limbic brain, most animals have it. Mussels don't have it, but octopus have it. And that limbic brain, it's what's responsible for your actions. The frontal neocortex is the one responsible for logic. But actions do not follow logic. There is several books about this, which I'll just give them to you. The first one is my favorite. Simon Sinek is the guy who spoke earlier about the analogy between Microsoft and a beggar. That aspect of marketing is my favorite. Dov Seidman, he wrote the book How, which is very good. And this won the Nobel Prize in economics by Daniel Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman has the theory of thinking fast, thinking slow. I have to give you a very big summary of all of this today. I don't have a choice. But like I said, I hope to instill in you the curiosity you can learn these things on your own, because these things will change your life. And what Kahneman says is, again, the frontal neocortex is what's responsible for logical thinking. If I give you something like this, then you look at it. This is the equivalent of you counting the number of passes that a certain team makes. And you activate a certain part of your brain when you want to do that. And the limbic brain is the one that tells you there's a tire there and you better start running. So the reason why decisions are made by the limbic brain is because it's key to our survival. The frontal neocortex is not key to our survival as a species, and is very recent. The limbic brain is far, far stronger. That's why Trump got elected. Even by people who disagree with everything. He has a way of affecting the limbic brain. So a lot of the reasons for success has to do more with the limbic brain than with the frontal neocortex. And to a certain extent, this is partly the reason why you can go to a job interview, answer every question right, and still not be hired. Because the brain that will hire you is this one, not this one. And a lot of what Amy Cuddy was talking about is because of that. She talked about hormones. I want to tell you about hormones. She talked about two hormones, testosterone and cortisol. I'm not going to be too interested in testosterone. I am going to be a little bit interested in cortisol, but there's another one, oxytocin, which I'm going to be much, much more interested in, because these are the ones that affect the limbic brain. The limbic brain is not affected by thoughts; it's affected by chemicals. And that's what I want to talk about next. I want to talk about chemicals. Okay? In the experiment that we did earlier that was screwed up by the computer, in the experiment we did earlier, when you don't see the moonwalking bear when you're counting passes, it's an indication that these two brains don't work at the same time. It's very hard to get both of these two brains to work at the same time. So if this one is the one that matters, if the limbic brain is the one that matters, then that's the one we have to look for in our actions. I want to show you this video, which is perhaps the first application of what I'm talking about. He will talk about the limbic brain, again, in the context of marketing.
We assume even we know why we do what we do. But then how do you explain when things don't go as we assume? Or better, How do you explain when others are able to achieve things that seem to defy all of the assumptions? For example, why is Apple so innovative? Year after year after year after year, they're more innovative than all their competition, and yet they're just a computer company. They're just like everyone else. They have the same access to the same talent, the same agencies, the same consultants, the same media. Then why is it that they seem to have something different? Why is it that Martin Luther King led the civil rights movement? He wasn't the only man who suffered in a pre-civil rights America, and he certainly wasn't the only great orator of the day. Why him? And why is it that the Wright brothers were able to figure out controlled powered manned flight when there were certainly other teams who were better qualified, better funded, and they didn't achieve powered manned flight, and the Wright brothers beat them to it? There's something else at play here. About 3.5 years ago, I made a discovery, and this discovery profoundly changed my view on how I thought the world worked, and it even profoundly changed the way in which I operate in it. As it turns out, there's a pattern. As it turns out, all the great and inspiring leaders and organizations in the world, whether it's Apple or Martin Luther King or the Wright brothers, they all think, act, and communicate the exact same way, and it's the complete opposite to everyone else. All I did was codify it. And it's probably the world's simplest idea. I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. People don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat screen TVs. They've been making flat screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products. And nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Here's the best part. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's all grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. If you look at a cross-section of the human brain looking from the top down, what you see is the human brain is actually broken into three major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle two sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. You know, sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and your figures, and they say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right. Because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart, or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal and want to be a part of what it is that you do? Again, the goal is not just to sell people who need what you have. The goal is to sell to people who believe what you believe. The goal is not just to hire people who need a job. It's to hire people who believe what you believe. I always say that, you know, there's if you hire people just because they can do a job, they'll work for your money. But if you hire people who believe what you believe, they work for you with blood and sweat and tears. And nowhere else is there a better example of this than with the Wright brothers. Most people don't know about Samuel Pierpont Langley. And back in the early 20th century, the pursuit of powered man flight was like the .com of the day. Everybody was trying it. And Samuel Pierpont Langley had what we assume to be the recipe for success. I mean, even now, you ask people, why did your product or why did your company fail? And people always give you the same permutation of the same three things. Undercapitalized, the wrong people, bad market conditions. It's always the same three things. So let's explore that. Samuel Pierpont Langley was given $50,000 by the War Department to figure out this flying machine. Money was no problem. He held a seat at Harvard and worked at the Smithsonian and was extremely well connected. He knew all the big minds of the day. He hired the best minds money could find, and the market conditions were fantastic. The New York Times followed him around everywhere, and everyone was rooting for Langley. And how come we've never heard of Samuel Pierpont Langley? A few hundred miles away in Dayton, Ohio, Orville and Wilbur Wright. They had none of what we consider to be the recipe for success. They had no money. They paid for their dream with the proceeds from their bicycle shop. Not a single person on the Wright brothers' team had a college education, not even Orville or Wilbur. And the New York Times followed them around nowhere. The difference was Orville and Wilbur were driven by a cause, by a purpose, by a belief. They believed that if they could figure out this flying machine, it'll change the course of the world. Samuel Pierpont Langley was different. He wanted to be rich and he wanted to be famous. He was in pursuit of the result. He was in pursuit of the riches. And lo and behold, look what happened. The people who believed in the Wright brothers' dream worked with them with blood and sweat and tears. The others just worked for the paycheck. And they tell stories of how every time the Wright brothers went out, they would have to take 5 sets of parts because that's how many times they would crash before they came in for supper. And eventually, on December 17th, 1903, the Wright brothers took flight. and no one was there to even experience it. We found out about it a few days later. And further proof that Langley was motivated by the wrong thing, the day the Wright brothers took flight, he quit. He could have said, "That's an amazing discovery, guys. Now we'll improve upon your technology." But he didn't. He wasn't first. He didn't get rich. He didn't get famous. So he quit. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you talk about what you believe, you will attract those who believe what you believe. Well, why is it important to attract those who believe what you believe? Something called the law of diffusion of innovation. And if you don't know the law, you definitely know the terminology. The first 2.5% of our population are our innovators. The next 13.5% of our population are our early adopters. The next 34% are your early majority, your late majority, and your laggards. The only reason these people buy touch-tone phones is because you can't buy rotary phones anymore. We all sit at various places at various times on the scale, but what the law of diffusion of innovation tells us is that if you want mass market success or mass market acceptance of an idea, you cannot have it until you achieve this tipping point between 15 and 18% market penetration, and then the system tips. And I love asking businesses, what's your conversion on new business? And they love to tell you, oh, it's about 10%, proudly. Well, you can trip over 10% of the customers. We all have about 10% who just get it. That's how we describe them, right? That's like that gut feeling, oh, they just get it. The problem is, how do you find the ones that just get it before you're doing business with them versus the ones who don't get it? So it's this here, this little gap, that you have to close, as Geoffrey Moore calls it, crossing the chasm. Because you see, the early majority will not try something until someone else has tried it first. And these guys, the innovators and the early adopters, they're comfortable making those gut decisions. They're more comfortable making those intuitive decisions that are driven by what they believe about the world and not just what product is available. These are the people who stood online for 6 hours to buy an iPhone when they first came out, when you could have just walked into the store the next week and bought one off the shelf. These are the people who spent $40,000 on flat-screen TVs when they first came out, even though the technology was substandard. And by the way, they didn't do it because the technology was so great. They did it for themselves. It's because they wanted to be first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. In fact, people will do the things that prove what they believe. The reason that person bought the iPhone in the first 6 hours, or stood in line for 6 hours, was because of what they believed about the world and how they wanted everybody to see them. They were first. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So let me give you a famous example, a famous failure and a famous success of the law of diffusion of innovation. First, the famous failure. It's a commercial example. As we said before a second ago, the recipe for success is money and the right people and the right marketing conditions, right? You should have success then. Look at TiVo. From the time TiVo came out about 8 or 9 years ago to this current day, they are the single highest quality product on the market. Hands down, there is no dispute. They were extremely well funded. Market conditions were fantastic. I mean, we use TiVo as a verb. I TiVo stuff on my piece of junk Time Warner DVR all the time. But TiVo is a commercial failure. They've never made money. And when they went IPO, their stock was at about $30 or $40 and then plummeted, and it's never traded above 10. In fact, I don't think it's even traded above 6, except for a couple of little spikes. Because you see, when TiVo launched their product, they told us all what they had. They said, we have a product that pauses live TV, skips commercials, rewinds live TV, and memorizes your viewing habits without you even asking. And the cynical majority said, we don't believe you, we don't need it, we don't like it, you're scaring us. What if they had said, if you're the kind of person who likes to have total control over every aspect of your life, boy, do we have a product for you. It pauses live TV, skips commercials, memorizes your viewing habits, etc., etc. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, and what you do simply serves as the proof of what you believe. Now let me give you a successful example of the law of diffusion of innovation. In the summer of 1963, 250,000 people showed up on the Mall in Washington to hear Dr. King speak. They sent out no invitations, and there was no website to check the date. How do you do that? Well, Dr. King wasn't the only man in America who was a great orator. He wasn't the only man in America who suffered in a pre-civil rights America. In fact, some of his ideas were bad, but he had a gift. He didn't go around telling people what needed to change in America. He went around and told people what he believed. I believe, I believe, I believe, he told people. And people who believed what he believed took his cause and they made it their own, and they told people. And some of those people created structures to get the word out to even more people. And lo and behold, 250,000 people showed up on the right day, on the right time to hear him speak. How many of them showed up for him? 0. They showed up for themselves. It's what they believed about America that got them to travel on a bus for 8 hours to stand in the sun in Washington in the middle of August. It's what they believed. And it wasn't about black versus white. 25% of the audience was white. Dr. King believed that there are 2 types of laws in this world, those that are made by a higher authority and those that are made by man. And not until all the laws that are made by man are consistent with the laws that are made by the higher authority will we live in a just world. It just so happens that the civil rights movement was the perfect thing to help him bring his cause to life. We followed him not for him, but for ourselves. And by the way, he gave the I have a dream speech, not the I have a plan speech. Listen to politicians now with their comprehensive 12-point plans. They're not inspiring anybody. Because there are leaders and there are those who lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority, but those who lead inspire us. Whether they're individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead not for them, but for ourselves. And it's those who start with why that have the ability to inspire those around them or find others who inspire them. Thank you very much.
I think the point has been made. We saw the experiment. I already somehow proved to you that the limbic brain and the frontal neocortex cannot work together at the same time. He shows us how the limbic brain is responsible for decision making and how the connection between the limbic brain and the frontal neocortex is actually very weak. And now I want to take that further and talk about the implications of that. We'll take that as a fact. What are the implications of that? The implications as they matter to you. He's getting into marketing and business development, which is great. Maybe you're interested in that, but I wanted to stop the video because now we're not so much interested in that. I want to go back to the why things happen, because this is where the magic occurs. One thing that I like to do, I don't have time to do it today, but one thing that I like to do, I have these websites here, and I like to go through them. When you go to the website, and you should do this exercise and look at it. And what it's telling you? What is that second reaction you have of it? So you act as the interviewer now, okay, as a consumer of products, whether it's Goldman Sachs or Tesla or something. And then you judge whether they do a good job at communicating what they want to say. So you are it's an exercise I highly recommend that you do. I have this website. You can go to more, okay? But I include the last one is MMF. It's my own website. It's not, we'll make it better, okay? But at least maybe there's something there that you can see. It explains who we are. This is how I think, this is how I act. It's always, I like to go to the why because this is what gets people to see if they agree or disagree with me, okay? And this has implications when you're working in the workplace. And some of you will have jobs and you will love your job, and some of you will have jobs and you will hate your job. You're all going to have jobs. That I'm taking that into account. And the way that most companies deal with employees is there's 3 types. The most common one is the relationship between the employer and the employees through coercion. do this, or that's coercion, right? University of Toronto, how do we deal with students? It's sad, but that's how most of that works, right? As by now, I think you know me. You know, I try to not follow that. Coercion is not something that really is very productive. Motivation is considered to be the best way of dealing with, human-to-human interaction. Which, if I follow the approach of Simon Sinek, I would say coercion is focused on the what, right? Do what you do. You do it, great, you're done, right? The motivation is the how. What is your value proposition? That's what he says. And it certainly is better than coercion. It certainly, how is better than the what. But my favorite is inspiration, which goes to the why. And this is where, again, this is where the magic happens. Some of you will be lucky that you will be working in companies where you feel inspired, where the company inspires you, or whether one day you will be a manager, you'll be a boss, you'll be the CEO of a company, and then you'll get to inspire others. The reason inspiration works better is because it goes to the why and goes right into the limbic brain, goes right into the decision making. When you're talking to yourself and you're adopting your high power poses, as Amy Cuddy was saying, why is that having the effect that she tells us? Why do you become even smarter? What do you become? Why is that? Because you're talking to the limbic brain. All these things affect the limbic brain. The limbic brain is the best kept secret about this. Oh, I'll give you a footnote, which is very important. GPT, ChatGPT, right? Okay, so artificial intelligence is doing very, very well at replicating what part of the brain? Now we can answer that. The neocortex. Only the neocortex. Is there any hope that, say, ChatGPT can get into the limbic brain? Why not? There's no data. There's no data. We are pre-programmed. When we're born, we already have a working CPU that is called the limbic brain, and it acts in a certain way, and your dog has, or your cat has, that limbic brain, and it works in a similar way. But there isn't data because it has no language. We've been able to interpret language, and language we have written language, and this is how computers are trained, and that's how large language models are built. But when there is no language, there's no data. If there's no data, you can't have. So as of today, this part of the brain is still not being revolutionized by technology. And because of that, I believe it's going to become more and more and more important because it can be replicated. That's one area where ChatGPT is going to have difficulties getting people to love you and therefore buy your products. That's difficult, and that's because there's no data. So this is very interesting, and you should reflect on this, all right? So there are these three ways of coercion, motivation, and inspiration, three ways of dealing with people, managing people. And I have here, it's a very short video, but it's a very good example of the difference between them. Very good example of the difference between inspiration and everything else. It's only 2 minutes. Let's just watch it. It's by Dov Seidman, one of my favorite authors also.
I landed in Las Vegas a while back. And when we landed, the flight attendant got on the loudspeaker with humor and good energy and said, listen, we've done some research in Southwest Airlines. And it turns out that before you deplane, if you reach around and cross your seatbelts one over the other, you're going to have good luck at the tables. Now, we all started laughing the way you did, but we did it. Now, there's a federal regulation that seatbelts need to be crossed before the next plane takes off. They turn their planes around 6 minutes faster than their nearest rival. It would have taken her exactly 6 minutes to go up and down the aisles and do it herself. they're also proclaiming home on time, no frills, fun, and safe. And she authentically connected with that. And I can assure you there's no manual or rule book that says when you land in Las Vegas, tell the seatbelt joke. She's probably going to innovate, and when they land in Los Angeles, she'll swap out gambling for celebrity sightings or something like that. And she doesn't get paid extra to do that. So here is an inspired person connecting with their passengers, okay, in a way that complies with law, delivers an operational advantage, and fulfills the company promise. And there must be ways to bring this together so it becomes, your question becomes a false choice.
But it again goes into that. He has a very good story that I like to just point it out to you. You know the wave when you're in a stadium watching sports? You know who invented the wave? He actually has it in his book. It happened in 1981, October 15. I have the summary of the story here, but it's really remarkable. This guy, Crazy George Henderson, he had the idea. He was, imagine that you're in a stadium, 50,000 people, and you had the idea, oh, I think we should do the wave. How do you do it? There's 50,000 people. You cannot talk to them. You can't go around and say, hey, let's do this. You can't. He just got the people around him to do it. It took him 3 trials. And in the third one, everybody understood. Everybody saw that. 50,000 people, no language. Okay, so these things are very, I'm going to skip over this video. I'm not interested. Okay, so these things these things are the basis for that world of mystery that gets things done. From Amy Cuddy, I think we'll probably understand that your body has consequences, not only when you talk to people, when you talk to yourself. We've had these considerations about verbals and non-verbals. I have here some papers that discuss how the use of emoticons in negotiations actually make a difference. Amy Cuddy mentioned that in her video also. Why are all these things happening? And for that, I want to now switch into a different way of thinking. I want to start with game theory. I want to talk a little bit of game theory today. I want to talk about finite games and infinite games. I want to start with a finite game. An example of a finite game is what you're doing here now. Right? Not here in my class, but in university. Being a student is a finite game. I'm talking from a game theoretical perspective, not from an entertainment perspective. It's a game theoretical. You have known rules. You have to take courses, you pass them, there's quizzes, 10 maybe, then, right? And then they have exams, you have to pass them, and then they said, when the game ends. It ends at graduation. So it's a finite game. Known rules, known players, and a fixed point in time. Yes? You're very well trained for this game. You're wonderful. You've been playing this game for how long? About 20 years. You have a lot of experience. You have more than 10,000 hours of experience at that game. No one can beat you at that game. Yes? Okay, well, what happens after you graduate? I told you this course is there to be useful and to get you, not only to get you a job, but hopefully my course will be there with you for many, many years and will help you not just get a job, but get a good one, and maybe then give good jobs to other people. What happens when you graduate, when you leave university and you go into the workplace? The game changes because it's now an infinite game. It has the rules change, the players change, and there's no end time. And many people have difficulty adapting to that. It is not about scoring well in something. Okay. And by the way job interviews are conducted is sometimes to see how good a player you are at this, because the game is different. So if you go there with your finite game playing skills being on display at the job interview, that's not going to impress anybody. There are other considerations they're going to be looking for. And things such as social interaction and this and that, these things will matter. So let me get into the job interview perspective, I think I want to spend the rest of my class talking about job interviews. How everything we've learned in class now will spill over to the case of a job interview. You understand that? Actually, let me say one more comment. When you look at a finite game, it's all about the what. Now, I'm borrowing from Simon Sinek's language. It's all about the what. It's what you do. Why you do it, no one cares. Why you're here, no one cares. Some people go into math, some people go into finance, some people go into chemistry. When you go into a finite, into an infinite game, the why becomes much more relevant. And that's where values matter. And that is something that at the job interview will become more and more important. That's what people will be screening for. You have a question?
Yeah, I'm sort of just curious, like when you say a finite game, there's also sort of a difference between an undergraduate student and a graduate student, right? Like in terms of the what and the why. Like
Yeah.
You have to think about why when you're a graduate student a lot more than undergraduate.
As a graduate, you can argue whether a graduate student, I mean, how many graduate students fail because they don't pass an exam? Very few, very few. How many of them fail because they don't finish a thesis? Sorry, because they fail their thesis? No, you abandon. That's what you do, right? And one of the one of the differences between finite games and infinite games is that the way to get out of an infinite game is by giving up. Okay, very rare that you leave a finite game by giving up. You just stay until the end of it, and then you get something. So the possibility of abandoning is perhaps a good distinction between the two games. So from that perspective, a graduate student is more of an infinite game. In fact, I would argue it's an infinite game than this one. And by the way, that's what I tell my MMF students, that the MMF, more than anything, is an infinite game. And these are consequences. For example, one consequence is what happens if you cheat? Cheating. If you cheat as an undergraduate student, what happens? You get caught, that's the end of it, right? Game over. If you don't get caught, maybe no consequence, right? I'm not suggesting you do it, right? It is, we understand each other. In an infinite game, if you cheat, you just don't know. You just don't know how that's going to play, because you don't, I mean, the idea of getting caught, even the suspicion that you cheated, is going to be with you for a long time. Just the suspicion that you cheated is going to be with you for a long time. Whereas here, well, I didn't get caught. Then, difference between a finite game and an infinite game. There are many, many differences. Let me get into the ones which have to do with behavior, as opposed to the ones that have to do with rules. Okay, and for that, there's a sentence that I want you to reflect upon, which is, if you can't captivate, you have to be cheap. This goes for commercial products. This goes even for yourself. And why is that? Why is that? Let me talk about drugs now. I'm going to tell you how the brain works from a chemical perspective. And these things are now very well understood. Very well understood. On the one hand, we have selfish drugs. There's many drugs, by the way, many, many, many. They're all chemicals. I'm going to focus on 4, which have to do with what I'm talking about. The first is endorphins. Endorphins is a selfish drug. It's a drug that you produce when you do exercise. And why do we produce this drug? If you go hunting, who wants to go hunting when you can stay and be comfortably waiting for the people who went hunting to bring you food back? Why? So endorphins is a drug. It's actually a painkiller. It's a very strong painkiller. When you do exercise, you produce it so that your muscles don't feel the pain. You know, sometimes may have happened to you when you laugh, you produce endorphins, right? And at some point, that happens, you're laughing so much that it starts to hurt. You run out of endorphins. That's what happens. You don't have any more endorphins to produce, and then your muscles start to ache. They're painful, and that's because of endorphins. So endorphins, they are painkillers, and you produce them when you do exercise. And they are there because without that, we would have no encouragement to do exercise. Endorphins are addictive. Those people who do exercise on a regular basis know that if you don't do exercise, you miss it. This is a drug which is addictive, and they all affect the limbic brain. This is why you go hunting. This is why you do physical exercise. This is why you go running even when it's very cold outside. Okay? Dopamine, another drug which is also addictive. And this is activated in survival mode. It's the one that gets us to do stuff. You do something and say, I feel good because I did something. Have you seen this device? They sell it at Staples. Have you seen that? You know what it is? You know what it is? It's a button. It's like $25. You buy this button, and what happens when you press it? What? That was easy. That's what it says. Why would someone pay $25 for a button that says that was easy? Why? It gives you a shot of dopamine. Makes you feel good, right? When you finish the homework, when you finish the quiz, you get dopamine. You say, that was good, right? And it's also addictive. You are addicted to getting things done. That's where we get things done. Okay? Yes? Okay. Now, these drugs are great, but they are not interesting for us today. They are selfish drugs. These are drugs that you do in isolation, just to yourself. It's good to know. They're great motivators, but if you go to a job interview, these things don't matter very much. So let me now go to the social drugs. These are drugs that we can only produce in social interactions. Far more interesting. Because, well, far more interesting from a communication perspective, because as I told you, communication is about social interactions. And now you understand why talking to a computer has nothing to do with my course today. Nothing. Right? We don't have any of this. So the most important social drug for us today is oxytocin, which I will have to spend a little bit of time on. I want you to actually hear not the inventor of the drug, but the one who discovered what it is for decades. It was known that this drug had to do with childbirth and with nursing babies. It was known. It was considered to be a female hormone until Paul Zak, who will, I'll have his video, he will explain to us how he discovered that this has other consequences. And I sustain the statement that oxytocin is what will get you hired. I will prove it to you. It's the love hormone. And you can then go and watch the video by Amy Cuddy all over again. And she talks about testosterone and cortisol, but if you bring in oxytocin into that video, then suddenly you understand a lot of the behavior that you want to happen for you when you go to a job interview, okay? And then the last one is serotonin, is the happiness hormone. And, well, it's what you have a piece of chocolate, that's what you produce, yes? So these are the drugs which are of interest to us. These are social drugs. Oh, serotonin, you can only do it socially. If you drink a piece of chocolate on your own, no. But if you have it with friends, yes. They drive behavior. These drugs drive behavior. Endorphins, they get you to go out and do exercise. Dopamine gets you to get things done. Oxytocin gets you to relate to people and get you to miss when certain things are not happening. For example, during COVID, everybody had a withdrawal syndrome of oxytocin. Because as we will see later, well, actually Paul will tell us, you produce oxytocin when you hug someone for 8 seconds. Yeah. If you can't interact with people, if you can't hug people, then you don't produce as much oxytocin, and then you have withdrawal symptom. Okay, so during COVID, a lot of the problems that we experienced was because of that. Okay, and then serotonin is the absence of, you will have withdrawal syndrome when you have an absence of being together with friends. Okay, so these drive behavior. I'm going to skip over this. I don't have time to go. I have a lot of videos now because I want these people to tell you about these drugs. I'm not an expert on this. I've just been consuming this and lecturing about this for years and years and years, but these guys are the experts, I'm not. So I'm just going to go over this video. I'm not going to go. This one talks about, and these are good videos because they apply how what we're talking about here in a corporate setting. There are videos where these authors, they explain how these things apply this in a corporate setting. I don't have time to do that, but I do want to play this video. This is Paul Zak. He is the one who in the 80s discovered that oxytocin is not only the female hormone, it's actually one that we all produce. And let's hear it, and then we'll draw some consequences from that.
Is there anything unique about human beings? There is. We're the only creatures with fully developed moral sentiments. We're obsessed with morality as social creatures. We need to know why people are doing what they're doing. And I personally am obsessed with morality. It's all due to this woman, Sister Mary Maristella, also known as my mom. As an altar boy, I breathed in a lot of incense, and I learned to say phrases in Latin. But I also had time to think about whether my mother's top-down morality applied to everybody. I saw that people who were religious and non-religious were equally obsessed with morality, and I thought maybe there was an earthly basis for moral decisions. But I wanted to go further than to say our brains make us moral. I want to know if there's a chemistry of morality. I want to know if there was a moral molecule. After 10 years of experiments, I found it. Oh, would you like to see it? I brought some with me. This little syringe contains the moral molecule. It's called oxytocin. So oxytocin is a simple and ancient molecule found only in mammals. In rodents, it was known to make mothers care for their offspring, and in some creatures, allowed for toleration of burrow mates. But in humans, it was only known to facilitate birth and breastfeeding in women, and is released by both sexes during sex. So when I had this idea that oxytocin might be the moral molecule, I did what most of us do. I tried it out on some colleagues. And one of them told me, "Paul, that is the world's stupidest idea." It is, he said, only a female molecule. Can't be that important. But I countered, well, men's brains make this too. There must be a reason why. But he was right. It was a stupid idea. But it was testably stupid. In other words, I thought I could design an experiment to see if oxytocin made people moral. Turns out it wasn't so easy. First of all, oxytocin is a shy molecule. Baseline levels are near zero without some stimulus to cause its release. And when it's produced, it has a 3-minute half-life and degrades rapidly at room temperature. So this experiment would have to cause a surge of oxytocin, have to grab it fast and keep it cold. I think I can do that. Now luckily, oxytocin is produced both in the brain and in the blood, so I could do this experiment without learning neurosurgery. Then I had to measure morality. So taking on morality with a capital M is a huge project. So I started smaller. Thought I'd study one single virtue, trustworthiness. Why? I had shown in the early 2000s that countries with a higher proportion of trustworthy people are more prosperous. So in these countries, more economic transactions occur and more wealth is created, alleviating poverty. So poor countries are by and large low trust countries. So if I understood the chemistry of trustworthiness, I might help alleviate poverty. But I'm also a skeptic. I don't want to just ask people, are you trustworthy? So instead I use the Jerry Maguire approach to research. If you're so virtuous, show me the money. So what we do in my lab is we tempt people with the virtue and vice by using money. Let me show you how we do that. So we recruit some people for an experiment. They'll get $10 if they agree to show up. Then we give them lots of instruction, and we never, ever deceive them. Then we match them in pairs by computer. And in that pair, one person gets a message saying, do you want to give up some of your $10 you earned for being here and ship it to someone else in the lab? But the trick is you can't see them, you can't talk to them, you only do it one time. Now, whatever you give up gets tripled in the other person's account. Going to make them a lot wealthier. And they get a message by computer saying, person one sent you this amount of money. Do you want to keep it all, or do you want to send some amount back? Okay, so think about this experiment for a minute. You're going to sit in these hard chairs for an hour and a half. Some mad scientist is going to jab your arm with a needle and take 4 tubes of blood. And now you want me to give up this money and ship it to a stranger? So this was the birth of vampire economics. Make a decision, give me some blood. So in fact, experimental economists had run this task around the world and for much higher stakes. And the consensus view was that the transfer from the first person to the second was a measure of trust. And the transfer from the second person back to the first measured trustworthiness. But in fact, economists were flummoxed on why the second person would ever return any money. They assumed money is good. Why not keep it all? That's not what we found. We found 90% of the first decision makers sent money, and of those who received money, 95% returned some of it. But why? Well, by measuring oxytocin, we found that the more money the second person received, the more their brain produced oxytocin, and the more oxytocin on board, the more money they returned. So we have a biology of trustworthiness. But wait, what's wrong with this experiment? 2 things. One is that nothing in the body happens in isolation. So we measured 9 other molecules that interact with oxytocin, and they didn't have any effect. But the second is that I still only had this indirect relationship between oxytocin and trustworthiness. I didn't know for sure oxytocin caused trustworthiness. So for my next experiment, I know I'd have to go into the brain and manipulate oxytocin directly. I used everything short of a drill to get oxytocin into my own brain. And I found I could do it with a nasal inhaler. So along with colleagues in Zurich, we put 200 men on oxytocin or placebo, had them do that same trust task with money, and we found that those on oxytocin not only showed more trust, we could more than double the number of people who sent all their money to a stranger, all without altering mood or cognition. So oxytocin is the trust molecule, but is it the moral molecule? Using the oxytocin inhaler, we ran more studies. We showed that oxytocin infusion increases generosity in unilateral monetary transfers by 80%. We showed it increases donations to charity by 50%. I've also investigated non-pharmacologic ways to raise oxytocin. These include massage, dancing, and praying. Yes, my mom was happy about that last one. And whenever we raise oxytocin, people willingly open up their wallets and share money with strangers. But why do they do this? What does it feel like when your brain is flooded with oxytocin? To investigate this question, we ran an experiment where we had people watch a video of a father and his 4-year-old son, and the son has terminal brain cancer. After they watched the video, we had them rate their feelings and took blood before and after to measure oxytocin. The change in oxytocin predicted their feelings of empathy. So it's empathy that makes us connect to other people. It's empathy that makes us help other people. It's empathy that makes us moral. Now, this idea is not new. A then unknown philosopher named Adam Smith wrote a book in 1759 called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. In this book, Smith argued that we are moral creatures not because of a top-down reason, but for a bottom-up reason. He said we're social creatures, so we share the emotions of others. So if I do something that hurts you, I feel that pain. So I tend to avoid that. If I do something that makes you happy, I get to share your joy. So I tend to do those things. Now, this is the same Adam Smith who 17 years later would write a little book called The Wealth of Nations, the founding document of economics. But he was, in fact, a moral philosopher. And he was right on why we're moral. I just found the molecule behind it. But knowing that molecule is valuable because it tells us how to turn up this behavior and what turns it off. In particular, it tells us why we see immorality. So to investigate immorality, let me bring you back now to 1980. I'm working at a gas station in the outskirts of Santa Barbara, California. You sit in a gas station all day, you see lots of morality and morality, let me tell you. So one Sunday afternoon, a man walks into my cashier's booth with this beautiful jewelry box, opens it up, and there's a pearl necklace inside. And he said, "Hey, I was in the men's room, I just found this. What do you think we should do with it?" Oh, put in lost and found. He said, "Oh, this is very valuable. Well, we have to find the owner for this." I said, "Yeah." So we're trying to decide what to do with this. The phone rings. And a man says, very excitedly, "I was in your gas station a while ago and I bought this jewelry for my wife and I can't find it." I said, "Pearl necklace?" "Yeah." "Hey, a guy just found it." "Oh, saving my life. Here's my phone number. Tell that guy to wait half an hour. I'll be there and I'll give him a $200 reward." Great. So I tell the guy, "Look, relax, get yourself a fat reward, life's good." I said, "I can't do it. I have this job interview in Goleta in 15 minutes and I need this job. I gotta go." Again, he asked me, "What do you think we should do?" I'm in high school. I have no idea. Right? So I said, "I'll hold it for you." He said, "You've been so nice. Let's split the reward. I'll give you the jewelry. You give me $100. And when the guy comes, right, you see it, I was conned. Right? There's a classic con called the pigeon drop. And I was the pigeon. So the way many cons work is not that the con man gets the victim to trust him, is that he shows he trusts the victim. Now we know what happens. The victim's brain releases oxytocin, and you're opening up your wallet or purse and giving away the money. Right? Okay. So who are these people who manipulate our oxytocin systems? We found, testing thousands of individuals, that 5% of the population don't release oxytocin on stimulus. So if you trust them, their brains don't release oxytocin. If there's money on the table, they keep it all. So there's a technical word for these people in my lab. We call them bastards. These are not people you want to have a beer with. They have many of the attributes of psychopaths. Okay? Now, there are other ways this system can be inhibited. One is through improper nurturing. So we've studied sexually abused women, and about half of those don't release oxytocin on stimulus. Okay? You need enough nurturing for this system to develop properly. Also, high stress inhibits oxytocin. So we all know this. When we're really stressed out, we're not acting our best. There's another way oxytocin is inhibited, which is interesting, through the action of testosterone. So we, in experiments, have administered testosterone to men, and instead of sharing money, they become selfish. Okay? But interestingly, high testosterone males are also more likely to use their own money to punish others for being selfish. Okay. Now think about this. It means within our own biology, we have the yin and yang of morality. We have oxytocin that connects us to others, makes us feel what they feel. And we have testosterone. And men have 10 times the testosterone as women, so men do this more than women. We have testosterone that makes us want to punish people who behave immorally. We don't need God or government telling what to do. It's all inside of us. Okay. Right, so you may be wondering, oh, these are beautiful laboratory experiments. Do they really apply to real life? Yeah, I've been worrying about that too. So I've gone out of the lab to see if this really holds in our daily lives. So last summer, I attended a wedding in southern England. 200 people in this beautiful Victorian mansion. I didn't know a single person. And I drove up in my rented Vauxhall, and I took out a centrifuge and dry ice and needles and tubes. And I took blood from the bride and the groom and the wedding party and the family and the friends before and immediately after the vows. And guess what? Weddings cause the release of oxytocin, but they do so in a very particular way. Who is the center of the wedding solar system? The bride. She had the biggest increase in oxytocin. Who loves the wedding almost as much as the bride? Her mother, that's right. Her mother was number 2. then the groom's father, then the groom, then the family, then the friends, arrayed around the bride like planets around the sun. So I think it tells us that we've designed this ritual to connect us to this new couple, connect us emotionally. Why? Because we need them to be successful at reproducing, to perpetuate the species. I also worried that my trust experiments with small amounts of money didn't really capture how often we actually trust our lives to strangers. So even though I have a fear of heights, I recently strapped myself to another human being and stepped out of an airplane at 12,000 feet. I took my blood before and after, and I had a huge spike in oxytocin. And there's so many ways we can connect to people. For example, through social media. Many people are tweeting right now. So we investigated the role of social media and found that using social media produces solid double-digit increases in oxytocin. So I ran this experiment recently for the Korean broadcasting system, and they had the reporters and their producers participate. And one of these guys, must have been 22, had a 150% spike in oxytocin. I mean, astounding. No one has this. So he was using social media in private. When I wrote my report to the Koreans, I said, look, I don't know what this guy was doing, but my guess was interacting with his mother or his girlfriend. They checked. He was interacting on his girlfriend's Facebook page. There you go. That's connection. Right? So there's tons of ways that we can connect to other people, and it seems to be universal. 2 weeks ago, I just got back from Papua New Guinea, where I went up to the highlands, very isolated tribes of subsistence farmers living as they have lived for millennia. There are 800 different languages in the highlands. These are the most primitive people in the world, and they indeed also release oxytocin. Okay, so oxytocin connects us to other people. Oxytocin makes us feel what other people feel, and it's so easy to cause people's brains to release oxytocin. I know how to do it, and my favorite way to do it is in fact the easiest. Let me show it to you. Come here, give me a hug. There you go. So my penchant for hugging other people has earned me the nickname Dr. Love. I'm happy to share a little more love in the world. It's great. But here's your prescription from Dr. Love. 8 hugs a day. We have found that people who release more oxytocin are happier. And they're happier because they have better relationships of all types. Dr. Love says 8 hugs a day. 8 hugs a day, you'll be happier and the world will be a better place. Of course, if you don't like to touch people, I can always shove this up your nose. Thank you. Thank you.
We've heard Amy Cuddy, we heard Simon Sinek, now this. So how do we take this to a job interview? We know what the first second is, right? How do we take this to a job interview? Well, they're only going to hire you if they love you, right? I mean, giving a hug to the person interviewing you might work, but I don't recommend it. Okay. But anything that, it's very clear, you need the person to create oxytocin. The frontal neocortex, as you can see, plays no role in this. And your knowledge plays very little role in you being hired. That's somehow what we get from all of this evidence and all of these people, don't you think? Yeah. It's all about the behavior. So let me focus on the things which you do not do when you go to a job interview. It's not an exam. You're not there to get a pass or fail. If you go with that attitude, I mean, you may pass, you may fail, you're not going to be hired. It's a person hiring you. It's not a computer, or it's not, You need to feel good about yourself. You need to perform. Whatever it is that you're doing, you need to perform. And for that, what we have is the advice of Amy Cuddy. You need to use your body, your posture, your presence to affect you in a positive way. And then last and perhaps most challenging is oxytocin, the social drug that will get you hired. If you're going to run for elections, that's the drug that will get you elected. And the trick in doing that, only you know. But you should plan what you're doing from that perspective. And of course, to that, you have to add the verbal skills. Don't forget, that's 35%. Actually, 30% of your reason to success. Okay? So to summarize my class today, 15% is the content. We did that for 11 lectures. You've done that for 4 years, maybe 20, depends how you count. Then you have the verbals. You have to take care of your language. And then the non-verbals, that's where the interesting stuff comes in. That's where the chemistry that affects behavior will drive the success for you. That clear? So go practice those job interviews with each other, filming yourself, and learning this part that I guess for some of you, for many of you, this is new, but is perhaps the main reason for your success. Okay? All right, that's the end of the course. I do want to talk about the what now, because you have the assignment 2 due. You may have questions. There was this problem with the quizzes. I realized what happened. When I assigned the quiz, it went to a single student, not to all of the students. So I have to figure out a fix for that. Don't worry, we'll find a fix. I'm not interested in the what right now. Okay, I'll figure it out, and it'll be great, and you'll all be fine. But with regards to assignment number 2, I hope after this lecture, you somehow understand what it is that I'm trying to get you to do. I gave you an impossible problem. You need to calculate the rate, the credit risk of a counterparty, a company, using 2 methods. And the 2 methods are giving you completely different answers, right? If you've already done that. Like, do I care? No, of course I don't. That's not the purpose of that assignment. That assignment is more about communication than anything else. Why? Because this is what you're going to be confronted with. You need to start practicing that. Many questions you've been asked during your studies have an answer, right? How often do they give you a question that has no answer? Rare, right? If you're a graduate student, yes, but rare, right? Here's a homework, there's no answers. Okay, there's no answer. So what? Well, there's no answer to assignment number 2. But the question is valid. The answer doesn't exist, but the question is valid, right? So what I want you to practice there, I want you to do an introspection. Take everything you've learned today and see what you do about that. What is the purpose of that assignment? That assignment will be marked by a human. Yes? So you have to communicate to the human what? I want you to think about that. Maybe you want to communicate to that human reading the assignment that you actually know your stuff, despite the fact that you get disparate answers, right? Maybe you found something which is interesting. You say, well, this gives me this, but by the way, look, something happened, right? So it's an exercise, it really is an exercise in presentation skills more than credit risk. I'm just using credit. So you get to do what you like to do, which is do some programming, get some answers, get some numbers, do some plots, and then what? You've done 15% of the work, right? Everything I asked you to do up until today is 15% of the assignment. The other 85% is what comes after. There will be some verbals, and there'll be some non-verbals, like what colors you choose, for example, the size of this, right? So that's what I want you to do. Don't ask me what you do with this or that, because I don't know. That's not the point. That assignment is not about the what, it's about the why. And I hope that's clear. Yes? You have any questions about assignment number 2? No? Okay. So it was great. to teach this course. Great to be with you. I'm always there. I'm on LinkedIn and all of that. Many of you will be looking for a job. I hope I can help you. And I'll keep track of your path to success. Okay? Thank you. Thank you.